Hello and welcome to Excel Weekend 10. Gives me great pleasure to be back again, even if though I'm not here in person. I'm actually in London at the moment, although I'm normally based in Australia. Actually at another event that's been going on this week you might be aware of. But the two sit side by side and I'm happily pleased to be here, and the fact no one's asking me to try and present in either Spanish or Portuguese or any other language than my own, which is profane. My name's Liam Bastick. Yes, I've got lots of letters and things after my name, but I'm just Liam. And I'm from a company called SumProduct. And I want to talk to you today about building forecast models with AI, Excel, and most importantly, trial and error. So, first of all, who am I? Well, I've been fortunate enough to be an Excel MVP, that's the most valuable professional, 14 times now. Bit of a fraud, still in the bottom half, I think, of all the people, the number of times they've been there, so I'm still a relative newbie here. I was fortunate enough to get a Lifetime Achievement Award in financial modelling and be a finalist for Excel. I won the inaugural Financial Modelling Award back in 2021, and that gave me quite a bit of a pride and pleasure because I've tried to simplify things more and more, and I feel that it's that technique, if nothing else, that's been rewarded. And using AI to help you is only going to simplify things more. As you probably tell from how I've started off, I am passionate about all things Excel, Power BI, AI, and logical. I've been a university professor. I am at the moment in a couple of places and things like that. I write books. I do all sorts of things to try and get the message across. As I keep trying to say, I'm trying to change the world one finance person at a time. And it's certainly not to make money because, trust me, if you look at my bank balance, my actual bank will just laugh at me. But I haven't written lots of books. No, I'm not going to try and sell you anything. We've got 5 in a series on financial modeling at the moment. You'd be pleased to know that the 6th one that's coming out is actually on AI later this year, and this is a kind of like a taster from it. And I will be putting lots of free stuff about this on our website, SumProduct.com. Feel free to check that out. It's not a sales pitch. There's nothing to buy there. There's new blogs every day. We have thought articles, which are reproduced items from various magazines that we write in. We have news items about all the latest stuff that's coming out in the world of Excel, financial modeling, Power BI, AI, and so on. So I'm talking about AI, BI. I wonder when we'll have CI. You know, it's something in there at some point in time. And we have newsletters. Who writes a newsletter each month that's somewhere between 40 and 70 pages? Somehow I managed to do that. It's a bit weird, really, isn't it? I need therapy, I think. Anyway, what are we going to do today? We're going to look at the shortened title is Building Forecast Models. Yes, with AI, Excel, and trial and error. I'm going to look at, how it's taking a look at the improving world of AI, because it is improving. I think about what happened 18 months ago and compare it to now, and it's just moved on so much. We'll look at how data scraping, analysis, computations, analyses have been improving in that time. I'm going to use Microsoft. I think that's appropriate here as an example. But I want to show that AI isn't the end product yet. It's not where we want it to be yet, but it's come a long way. And that's what I want to talk about here. That's the key message. All right. I've recorded this, so what can possibly go wrong? If it all falls over, I'll just delete the video and destroy all the evidence. So if you're sitting comfortably, let's begin. And if you're not sitting comfortably, I'm going to begin anyway. Right. Let's see what you can and can't do with artificial intelligence or AI. And essentially what I'm going to be looking at in this example that I'm putting together quickly here with help from colleagues is I'm going to be looking at ChatGPT, and I'm also going to be looking a bit later on at Copilot. Now, ChatGPT is the basis of Copilot. Okay, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but they sort of go hand in hand. So I thought I'd start off outside of the Microsoft ecosphere and just start off in the OpenAI forum of ChatGPT. You can see here at the top the URL. I've got chatgpt.com/, and you can clearly see I'm in the GPT 4.0. This is not the free version. We're going to be looking at exploring GPTs, that's the generative pre-trained transformers, the type of artificial intelligence model that you can can use to generate human-like text and content. Some of those have already been created, and these GPTs that I'm going to use are obviously not available for free users. They're really only available using ChatGPT Plus or higher. So I'm going to go and take one of these to help me with this, because this isn't a critique about what's the best one, what isn't. Some of you may have already gone round here and think, why on earth is Liam using this one? Look, there are others out there. This is the one I'm using. I'm not too hung up on this as another. I just wanted to show you what is and isn't appearing to be possible presently. So in the menu bar over on the left, first of all, I'm going to go over there and click on the button which says the Explore GPTs. And if you click on this here, you can discover and create custom versions of ChatGPT that combines instructions, extra knowledge, and any combination of skills. Look at that. I can read up at the top. It's quite impressive, really, isn't it? So I'm going to search these GPTs that are available here. As I say, it's not in the free version. So once I can actually type properly, can't seem to type and speak at the same time. I'm going for the financial report, and I'm looking at the various ones in here that you can see. There's various ones that we can actually pick on, and going through from the financial report expert is the one that you can see I've used previously. So I'm going to take this one. It's got a reasonable rating. I'm not saying this is perfect by any means, but it's one that I've used previously, and no offense to Anran who's put this together, it's just a case of that's what I'm going to go through here. So we're going to financial report expert, and you can see I've been looking at other statements in here, but I'm going to type in here, just as you would normally do, please can you give me the last 20 quarters of revenue, and I also want the gross profit, and I want the net income. So net income is your net profit after tax for non-Americans here, for good old Microsoft. So we'll do that. Maybe I won't even bother with a question mark. And it's talking to something called api.papermoney.ai, and it's giving me this information, and it's putting it in like this. And that's just coming straight out for me just typing a question. Impressive. Or is it? Now, I note here, because I have actually tried to do this before, even if it looks like I haven't rehearsed the thing, if we go through. Let's look at the first two quarters here, quarters ending, and sorry, it's in US dates for everybody that's outside of the US here. We've got the 30th of September 2024 and the 30th of June 2024, the revenue in million. Pay attention to that, because what I've actually done previously is done some research. Never trust AI completely. Always make sure you've got somewhere else you are checking through. It's like the old journalist thing that, check, and check again from different sources. And you can see here, this is the FY25 Q1 press release that I've got here, which has actually got the Microsoft revenue in here, the net income, and so on. So these are the genuine numbers, and you'll see they are different. These are not quite the same thing. And this is what happens. And this is one of the things that will catch people out, that everyone just trusts everything that AI does, and AI just doesn't always get it right. Doesn't mean it's not good, doesn't mean we can't use it, but we've got to use our brains as well. Got to do that. It's a two-way thing. It can help us, it can make us more productive and more efficient, but accuracy isn't always its greatest strength. So looking at these numbers, I've got it from a different source. You'll see that these numbers do not tie up. And we can do a little comparison perhaps on screen that will show the difference between the numbers, and you can see that it's just not working. These numbers are just not the same. So I'm going to go back into the message, the financial report expert, and say, look, this is garbage. What's going on? These numbers aren't correct. So challenge it and say, check them and have another go. So it's again going through, and maybe it's picked it from an older source, maybe it's just gone crazy, and it's going to have another go, and it will put it through. Now, just because it comes up with a second set of numbers doesn't mean these are right either. So you just keep going through this process until you get something that you feel is correct. So you're going through in here. So it's taking a bit longer this time. I don't know if it's hunting out other sources or what it's doing. It would be nice if it did actually tell you what it was doing and not just going through in here. But it's come up with a different set of number, and it says it's corrected the data and displayed the accurate last 20 quarters for the revenue, the gross profit, and net income for profit, and it's even put in Boston or Oxford commas. Now, my colleague Catherine will tell you how much I love those, so I appreciate that very much. Thank you. But it says if you'd like to make any adjustments, let me know, so you can go through. And it's also putting in here this idea of showing historical stock prices for Microsoft, providing Microsoft's latest financial ratios, so you can actually go through and have other data in here. So what do we do now? Well, okay, let's continue. We are looking at the numbers, see whether or not they make sense. So we go through and we're going through and we'll either agree with them or not, as the case may be. I'm still getting numbers that don't appear to be quite right, but you know, we can either keep going with it or not, as the case may be. I've got 65,585 against 65,488. So we have this issue that it's still coming up slightly differently, and so you can either correct them or whatever you want to do. Now I can keep going on through this forever, but conscious I don't have a long time here, so I'm going to continue with what I've got, and I'm going to ask it now to calculate the gross margin and net income margin for each period. Now let's just be clear here. If you were to ask normal GPTs about gross margins and net income margins and things like that, the eyes might glaze over. It may not actually seem to work out. You need perhaps more specialist GPTs out there, such as the financial report expert, so it understands that gross margin is looking at your gross profit divided by your revenue, and your net income margin is taking your net income and dividing it by revenue. Now, some of them will get it right, some of them won't. You can see I've already built up a tolerance that the numbers I've got are slightly different because I just want to move on, but you can keep going on or feed it your own numbers or whatever. But we're going to ask it to put these numbers in and see what it comes up with. And here you go. And you can see when it's put this in, it's put the Microsoft's last 20 quarters of financial data with margins, and it's done it to 29,000 decimal places because it's not big on formatting and things like this, but these are minor things. But if we have this as a spreadsheet, we can go in and correct some of the numbers. So we can see some things here that seem to be working okay, some that aren't, but we should, again, you should be looking at checking the numbers yourself and not actually just thinking, okay, I think this is fine, we can move on. So now we've got this data in here, I'm going to say, right, could you please plot all of this? Let's get this now. Let's get this onto a chart. You know, a picture tells 1,000 words, and I've spelled separate the wrong way here. Never mind. I'll just go through with separate. It should say pay rate axis for the margins versus the other numbers. So even if you put typos in here, it still knows what's going on. So I'm going to leave it like that rather than just going through. And I'm going to specify, the more you specify and you do what we call prompt engineering, the better it comes through. We're going to say the dates should be increasing from left to right. Why have I put that in? Because when I've done it in the past, it's not necessarily put it like that. I've had, in fact, in the past, I've had it descending and I've also had it alphanumerically. So I'm getting a bit fussy with that sort of thing in here just to put that through. Okay, so again, it's analyzing, and with the magic of pre-recorded videos here, we can give it a bit of time, and it's come up with a matplot library chart where it's put the dates in order. It's still giving it the US date format, but at least it is in descending. And we have got the Microsoft's last 20 quarters, and we've got it for revenue in US dollars millions, the net income in US dollar millions, net income margin, the gross profit in US dollars millions, and the gross margin. And it's actually saying it's plotted the last 20 quarters of financial data, explains what it's actually created, the revenue, gross profit and net income on one axis, and gross margin and net income margin on a separate axis. Okay, the quarters are arranged chronologically. Oh yeah, that would have been a good word to use. And it then says, have you got any adjustments you want me to make? So I can have a look and think, all right, let's have a look. And it's giving me options again, like showing Microsoft's annual financial trends or comparing it to competitors, which can be useful because it can go away and hunt that. And this is where AI is quite good. It is actually quite good at understanding market environments and analysis. So you could actually use that. But that's for another day. Let's stick with the chart because this is more about Excel. And I know this is what you're interested in. So I'm going to say, okay, let's get a bit fussier. Could you please color code the margins? What I want to do is I want them to correspond with their numbers here. Now, what do I mean by that? So I'm going to say, okay, um, I'm going to be a little bit ambiguous and see how good it is, because people write things which make sense to them that don't necessarily make sense to anyone else. I said I want them to correspond with their profit. So I'm probably thinking that I want a black or a blue for positive, and if it's negative, red, and also use for columns for the actual revenue and profit lines instead. And we'll see how good it gets with this. So let's have a look what the Matplot library chart is going to do this time. Bearing in mind, this is all still in ChatGPT. We haven't even got near Excel yet. So another one's come out of here, and it's updated the chart to use color-coded margins corresponding to the respective profits, and it's also used color-coded lines. The quarters are ordered from left to right, and it says, again, let me know if you like any changes or further analysis. And again, it's offering yearly revenue and profit trends, and you could compare Microsoft with another tech company if you want. Okay, we've got a chart in here that seems to be going through. I'm not quite sure if it's quite what I wanted, but it gives me an idea. It has changed the colors. You can get more specific, and that's what I'm going to do here. I said, look, let's make the gross profit the same color as what we wanted to make the gross margin, so that we can compare them. And also, can we do the same for the net income? So that's going to be the net income and the gross margin. And again, you'll notice I'm correcting myself to try and make it clearer, because whilst I might make sense to another human being, it's a little bit fussier when you're going in here. The better the prompt engineering, the more likely you're going to get out what you want. Notice as I hovered over it there, do you see what it actually said was that interactive charts aren't yet supported? You'll see it actually put this in. So some can be made interactive and some can't, but maybe this is something that's going to come up in the next year or so. So I don't know. I'm always a bit nervous as an MVP saying things like this, because I've been warned by Microsoft in the past, don't make predictions. Everybody thinks you've got insider information, and then that puts us under the hammer that we've got to go and do whatever it is you're suggesting. So I'm just making speculation as to what I think is actually going to perhaps be in there. That, if they're saying in here it's not yet interactive, it suggests to me that something's actually going on. Yeah, let's carry on. So it says, okay, I've updated the chart to make the gross profit bars match the color of the gross margin line. So that's green, and the net income bars now match the color of the net income margin line, blue. I'm going to forgive it the fact that it's spelt color in the US way. It is a US product after all. And the revenue bars are going to remain grey for contrast. Interesting, that's grey is the English spelling there. You're not consistent, GPT. Now let me know, again, if you'd like to make any other adjustments or explanations. And yet again, it's giving suggestions down at the bottom of simple things you can just press the button for to actually go for other options should you wish. And again, this is still in the Financial Report Expert, which is, a support mechanism for ChatGPT. So what next? All right, so I'm looking up my chart in here, and I'm seeing I've got blues, greens, and greys. It's a little bit difficult to tell what it is, but I'm starting to see the chart. It's, it could be made a little bit prettier, but I can't do too much more. So I'm going to say, okay, let's ask for some more questions now. So now, start to use idioms. Could you please pull up the free cash flow for each of these periods as well? It wants to get this data. Now, this is quite interesting, because I'm talking to you all, and you may think, what's free cash flow? And I'm just going straight in here. So, quick backstory. Free cash flow is used for valuations, and there's different types of valuation you can do on a business. You can do one which should equate to the total share price, which is the price per share multiplied by the number of shares. And that is of interest to the people who hold the shares. These are known as the equity shareholders. And this is called the equity valuation. And it uses what's called, to get the cash here, the free cash flow to equity. There's another type of free cash flow, though, where you're looking at what is the value worth from the perspective of all financial stakeholders. So not just the owners, the equity shareholders, but any preference shareholders, anybody who's got any debt in there, anybody else that's got any sort of financial interest whatsoever. And that uses something called free cash flow to the firm, which is different. And they're both different to the published cash flow statement that comes out in the statutory accounts. So in the statutory accounts, you get an income statement, which is showing you profit for a period. You've got the balance sheet, which at the end of that period shows you what the business is worth, which can be done either on what's called a current cost, where everything is just put in the price that it's currently worth, or historical cost, which is more often what people do because it's less work, where you put in what you paid for it at the time you bought it, which can make it a right mess to understand. But then you have the cash flow statement as well. And that really is a detailed analysis of the cash number that sits on the balance sheet. And at the end of the day, you can make all the adjustments to P&L and balance sheet accounting policies, but cash is cash is cash. Me changing depreciation rates, provision numbers, anything else is not going to affect what I have in the bank. But free cash flows do, because you don't bring everything in when you're looking at free cash flow to value things. For instance, if I'm looking at free cash flow to equity from the perspective of all shareholders, I'm looking at it before any dividends are paid or things like this. Anything to do with equity, so any drawdowns, any repayments, any dividends, excluded. And similarly, if we're looking at it for free cash flow to the firm, where we're looking at it for debt and equity shareholders, anything to do with any sort of interest, anything to do with debt drawdowns and repayments is also excluded, as well as the equity stuff. And this GPT knows that already. So it's not just going to take the cash flow statement number here, it's actually doing some calculations. Now, about a year and a half ago, there were some well-viewed videos on various social media platforms that actually show people putting examples together using ChatGPT in particular, calculating the free cash flow, where they did it 30 times and got 30 different numbers. The calculation engines have got cleverer. The GPTs, the financial reporting systems, have got cleverer as well. It's getting better. So I just want to flag all that because, again, you must go and check it, but it can now be assumed that it does know what a free cash flow is, and hopefully it knows whether it should be for the firm or for equity, because I've not specified that in here. Now, if all you've heard for the last few minutes is blah, 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 what I'm saying is, don't just give me the cash flow statement you can get straight from the report and accounts. I need you to make some adjustments so I can actually do a valuation of this business. And I'm either looking at it from the perspective of all shareholders, which would be free cash flow to equity, or from what is the business worth in general, which also takes into account any debt. So that would be free cash flow to the firm, it's called. So let's see what this GPT does. Now I've gone on this big ramble for a few minutes. So again, it's talking to the API papermoney.ai, and it's come up with these numbers. And again, we need to check these. So you should go and have a look at these to see whether or not you agree with them. So it's saying it's providing insight into Microsoft's cash generation capabilities over the past 5 years. So you must go and do separate calculations. And it's still offering, if you'd like to see this data visualized or need further analysis, just let me know. And you can say show a visual of the free cash flow, or you can calculate the free cash flow margins should you wish. So I'll just go in again and say, all right. So could you now forecast out revenue, gross profit, and net income, and the free cash flow, so this new thing we want. So I want you to put all of this together that we've gone through. And this is one of the things that was a problem a year or so ago. So one of the best documented examples from a while ago was you could do the free cash flow. You could get some numbers there. You could make some tax adjustments, and both would work. But when you said do the tax adjustments in the free cash flow, it would spit the dummy and get it wrong. Now I'm trying to get it to put it all together, and let's see how well it fares. And at every point you should check, validate, and come up with other versions of this. But here, I don't have 61 hours to put all this together. So let's have a look at what our financial reporting GPT comes up with now. It's exciting, isn't it? I haven't had so much fun since I pulled my toenails out. So it's come up with a 10-year forecast for Microsoft. I'd love to know what's the basis for this. So we read here, it says it's generated a 10-year forecast for Microsoft's revenue, gross profit, net income, and free cash flow. And it's taken this as 40 quarterly predictions, because I didn't specify that if you recall here, starting from Q4 2024, which makes sense. And it's now available to review, but it doesn't specify how it did it. which is interesting, but it seems to be evidence that it's going to use some sort of regression technique. So that would be nice to know. So I might want to ask the question, well, how did you come up with those numbers? Please explain. But again, we don't have 6 months for this. So just showing you what is possible in here. So let's assume we're happy with this. And I say, okay, so can you put these forecasts on a similar chart? Notice again, I'm not specifying what chart, but we've only got the charts that we had further up this session, but put them annually instead of quarterly on there. And so it's understanding, it gets the linguistics of what I'm saying, and it's going to analyze. So here we go. It's created an annual forecast chart for Microsoft's revenue, gross profit, net income, and free cash flow for the next 10 years. And you can see we've got the various quarters in here putting this together. And we've got it for 2024 out to 2034, and it's represented with distinct bars for the 4 financial metrics. And again, it's offering to make changes so we can go through and have a look should we wish. All right, so I'm going to go back and edit the question. So you can go and do this. So I'm going to go back to this prompt that I put in and say, right, can you justify these projections? And it's giving 2 different responses here. Now this is quite cool because there are 2 options here and you can decide which method you prefer and go through. So response 1 here is talking about forecasting financial metrics for Adecco using consideration of historical trends and so on and the assumptions. And it said, right, the revenue growth rate, it's looking at a compound annual growth rate for revenue of the past 10 years of around 11%. And it's assumed a gradual deceleration in growth, looking at potential market saturation and macroeconomic variability. At this point, I'm thinking blah, 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 blah. And it's also gone through and it's talked about Microsoft has maintained strong gross profit margins, and that's expected to remain stable due to its product mix and efficiency gains and just how long it's been in the market. And it's going on, you could keep going on with a net income margin. If you look at response 2, it's gone a little different in here. It's talking about the methodology and it's still giving the same thing, but it's stepping it out more. And you can see the growth rate calculation, the methodology here is stepped out using the compound annual growth rate for the past 20 quarters, and it's used that gross profit for the past 20 quarters and so on. And it's a case of which one do you prefer. And this gets subjective, but the GPT is trying to tune into you. So you can scroll down if you want, have a look at more of that, and you can decide which of the 2 you prefer. So it's giving me the choice. It's trying to tune in what is an easier way for me to understand this. Now, again, this isn't me going through everything in here. It's just explaining it's used the compound annual growth rate. So it's not using regression here, which is what I first thought. But I know there are other tools out there that will use regression techniques to do it. And if I don't like this particular GPT, I can go and find another one. So that's what I'm looking at here. Back to the prompts then. So what I'm going to do now is challenge the prediction. So can you grow the cash flow based on the growth of revenue and net income? And then what I want you to do is average the cash conversion rate. What the heck is the cash conversion rate? I meant to put conversion. Does it understand? Yeah, doesn't even blink an eyelid. I love this. I can type garbage and it will figure it out. Or maybe it has calculated the cash conversion rate. We can go through it, but the cash conversion rate in here. So it's working out what seems to be a relationship between profit and the free cash flow in here. And again, it said it's updated Microsoft free cash flow. It's now calculated based on the average cash conversion rate. So it knew what I meant. I love this. This, look, I'm criticizing some of the things where it goes wrong, but let's give it some, applause as well, where it realizes when I'm writing gibberish what I actually meant. And it said this method can arguably provide a more dynamic and realistic forecast. And again, it's prompting me, do you want to go and make any changes? And say, well, now I'm going to say, can you add these projections on to the data that we pulled up from the previous 5 years and chart them together. We want to show how everything has come together, and we want to show where the projections actually start. So it's making it as clear as possible because we haven't got this interactive chart as I mentioned before. So again, the Microsoft plot library chart is working on overtime. But you just think how long this would have taken you to do yourself. I mean, I've spent time waffling about free cash flows and other things in here. It's just knocking this up in seconds. And you can clearly see there's an easy demarcation, a nice straight one here where we've got all these things. It's getting quite a complicated chart in here. I noticed the years now become year 1 to year 10. We've lost the actual year in here. So we can argue we could get that to change, but it has combined the chart of historical and forecast financials for revenue, gross profit, net income, and the free cash flow, which you could challenge. And you could keep making this sweeter and so on. But I'm going to just keep going because I want to show you what's possible in here. So, okay, using these projected numbers, I want you to do a discounted cash flow valuation for the Microsoft company, and let's see what the value is worth. Now, again, I need to understand what a DCF is because, again, people in this audience here may not know what I'm talking about. So again, pause for thought, what's actually going on here? A discounted cash flow is when you're trying to think about, whether or not you should proceed with the project. If I said to you, give me $1,000 now, and in a year's time, I'll give you $1,100 back, you might think, that's not a bad deal, really. I'm making $100 over the next year, maybe tax to pay on it or something like that, but that's not too bad. But if I said, give me $1,000 and I'll give you 1,020 back in a year's time, you might say, well, no, I'm not so keen on that. I think I could get better by putting that in the bank. Because what happens over time, there's inflation, things go up. You're just thinking about, do I want money in the future? Do I want it now? Everybody wants things now. We have to take into account that money in the future is not worth what it is at this point in time. We have to discount it back. So therefore, future cash flows get reduced in proportion by a given discount rate, as an inflationary factor or cost of capital, and put this in. And what you're looking for is that after that inflationary factor has been taken into account, if the net return still sums up to something positive, then it's worthwhile. And that's what a discounted cash flow or net present value calculation does. It's DCF for short. It will do this. And I've not explained any of this to the GPT. I've explained it to you to explain what's going on, but it's actually saying, okay, I understand what's going on, and I want you to walk through that step by step. So it's going to go through and put this in. So it's going to do a free cash flow for the next 10 years. Let's just recap. Let's have a look at what the steps in this discounted cash flow, the DCF valuation, are according to ChatGPT then. So first, it's forecast the free cash flow, the FCF, for the next 10 years, and it's actually explained in the bullet points. So even if you don't know how to do it, if you're coming along and I didn't come here for an NPV training program here. That's not the point here. That's what ChatGPT and Copilot are for, to help you learn things, supposedly, but you must verify elsewhere. So it says it's forecast Microsoft's free cash flow for the next 10 years. Well, has it, or has it just used the cash flows that have been reported? Because a free cash flow is something else, and it's used that to run the DCF, so perhaps a challenge there. Then to determine the discount rate, it's used the weighted average cost of capital for Microsoft, but it's not told you where it's come from that point. But it says since the WACC changes over time can vary by source, it's going to assume a reasonable industry standard WACC for large cap tech companies of 9%. Well, you should go away and verify it. And should it be 9% each period? And if you don't really know what I'm talking about here, don't worry, because when you're doing your thing, you'll have some idea of what's going on, and you should challenge all the assumptions. So it's great to look at the documentation. Then it's talking about calculating the terminal value. So after 10 years, we'll assume that the Microsoft cash flows grow at a stable rate. So it's using this perpetuity formula. That's actually right. I know that. And I mean, I'm not going to go through. So we've got FCF10 is the free cash flow in the last forecasted year, which is the 10th year, multiplied by 1 plus the growth rate, divided by the discount rate minus the growth rate. I know that's right. So it's in that final period. Now, that's going to be relevant when we're going to look at Copilot in a few minutes. So park that thought that it knows that it's not actually applying a formula to all periods. It's period 10 and then actually multiplying by 1 plus the growth rate and then dividing that by a number which happens to be the discount rate minus the growth rate. Gone. Honestly, this is going to be a brilliant video to watch again the next time you suffer with insomnia, isn't it? Let's carry on. Also in here, if we are looking through, it's giving us the calculations. It's going through after the terminal value, discount the future cash flows back to the present value. Yep, that seems to make sense too. And we then have the actual calculations coming out, what the implied stock price would be. divide the equity value by the number of outstanding shares. So it's making it all through. It's documenting the assumptions. It's showing us the calculations, the sum of the discounted cash flows. We've got the discounted terminal value. That will give us the enterprise value as explained. It's assumed net debt. It's assumed zero here. You should again go and check. And then having got the net debt and all of that, we just keep going through here, reading through. It's working out the shares outstanding of 7.45 billion, gives us an implied stock price of around $174 per share. Now, I don't actually happen to know what the Microsoft share price is at the moment, so let's go and Google it. Oh, it's a little bit off. About 455 US dollars per share. So ChatGPT nil, Microsoft Corporation 1 here a little bit at the moment. But again, you need to go and look at the assumptions, and there are some things. Has it used the free cash flow? Has it just used statutory cash flows? That is a difference. Is the current stock price overtraded? Sometimes shareholders are not rational. Should we be looking at breaking down the revenue into different elements and applying different growth rates, and therefore have a different, more dramatic terminal growth rate going forward, especially with the advent of AI? You might think that the current assumptions for growth rates in terminal value may be a little bit on the low side. So you can go and challenge this a little bit more. That's the whole point. Now, I could go on and on and on about this till the cows come home, and you can go and fiddle with it and ask ChatGPT to run with different assumptions, or use this as a logic base to then recalculate in Excel or something like that. But I don't have 300 hours to go through all this in a video here, so let's look at other things that ChatGPT can do as well. Well, we'll look at some what-if analysis, where we're going to ask it to do some scenario analysis, where we'll say, look, listen to what you've just done. Can you run the same calculations, but this time let's do it with two other scenarios. One where we'll have the global economy entering a recession from 2025 to 2028, let's say, and another one where we're going to ask the artificial intelligence to say, okay, let's just say that it all takes off and results in significantly higher growth for Microsoft share prices. Now, whether we stipulate what we mean by that high growth or not is another thing. I'm letting ChatGPT just go for it. So what's it going to come up with as a result? It's fun, isn't it? We wait to see it analyze. It's giving us all this detail again as it did before. So we'll collapse that and see what it's coming up with. And here we go. We've got Microsoft DCF valuation for different scenarios, and it's compared the base case with the recession scenario and the AI growth rate. And you can see after we've looked at the little table that's come out, it summarizes underneath. We've got a recession scenario, as it's stipulated, 2025 to 2028 with 20% reduction. And it's gone down $3 per share. Now, that really does highlight that perhaps the implied stock price in the base case is very low. But the rapid growth scenario, where it's implying here 50% increase from 2025 onwards, well, that's still taking it up to only $259 per share. So, that's interesting, and you may need to tweak it more or get further into what's driving the current share price of Microsoft in actuality. But it gives you something to go away with. It highlights the fact that you should never take any AI output as gospel. You've always got to go and verify it somewhere else, because it does have a tendency to hallucinate or come up with wrong assumptions or what else. So in order to help with that, say, look, let's ask it a bit more about this. Can you go into more detail for these different scenarios and plot them on a chart? That's what we'll ask it to do now. And I've noticed I've not actually said what I want it to plot on a chart. So I'm giving AI a little bit of carte blanche here. So what's it going to come up with as a consequence? Right, well, it's come up with some scenario explanations. Just widen the columns here, and you can see the base case, the recession, and so on. And you can read it. It's explaining about compound annual growth rates, last 20 quarters. 2.5% is used to calculate terminal value for the base case. Recession's got to, the cash flows are reduced by 20% from the projected base case up until 2028. And then we've got the AI growth. And you can see in here, it's a 50% above the base case for 2025 to 2034 with a 2.5% terminal growth rate. Right, so you can read that. again. It's also come up with a chart. And in this particular case, I'm thinking, well, this chart here, it's not really what I wanted. What it's actually done here is it's done scenario analysis where it's actually looking at the base case, the recession scenario, that's always good, the recession scenario, and the AI growth scenario. You see, it's not even thinking, does recession scenario make sense? And what it's actually looking at is enterprise value, discounted cash flows, and terminal value, breaking it down. And while you can see it that way, I was actually hoping that it would perhaps compare them with the cash flows together, so it didn't read my mind. And no, AI isn't going for world domination just yet, so I'm going to say, right, what I meant when I said you were putting the chart down is, can you actually plot the cash flows of the different scenarios? So let's give it another go at seeing what it comes up with here. So it has another attempt here. So we're getting a visual chart, and it's doing this over 10 years, and let's have a look what comes up. Now, this gives us some insight here. So we've got here the three charts. The grey, if you can see that, is the base case free cash flow. In red, we have the recession scenario. It doesn't call it that this time, it's just recession scenario, free cash flow. And then we have the AI growth scenario, free cash flow. Now, again, I challenge whether these are free cash flows, but at least you can see what the assumptions are and then push whether or not you believe that these numbers are actually higher. So, for instance, we've got here about 25, that's about a 40. In year 3, we've got here the free cash flow is 40. What's that going to be? 40,000 million, so 40 billion here against about 60 billion. So that's a 50% increase. So you can see where the 50% increase is coming in this one. You can see the 20% reductions down here and so on. And it actually helps you understand what's going on, and you can keep tweaking it. So this gives us more insight. We can start to understand what AI is doing and whether we actually agree with it. And it's giving us some interpretation here. You can see that there's a little bit of commentary about the grey, the red, and the green lines, should you wish. But now I'm thinking, okay, we've done all of this so far in the ChatGPT interface. How about we actually ask it now, let's take this from here and put it into Excel. So could you please export the base case historical numbers and the forecast numbers onto an Excel spreadsheet? So it said, okay, let's go away and do that. It says it's done them. There's a file to download. You probably have to jump through a few hurdles to get it there. You can see it's coming through. It's downloaded it. No threats found. Excellent. That's always good to know that your AI isn't loading viruses up for you in order to try and take over the world. And it's opening up Excel, which, let's be honest, I hadn't even done that. So get some weird messages sometimes about whether the folder exists and blah, blah, blah. Might be an idea to have hit enable editing, but I'm going to widen the columns anyway, so you can see what's going on. So you can see I've got the quarter ending. I've got the revenue in US dollar millions. I've got the gross profit. I've got the net income, or the net profit after tax in US dollar millions, the free cash flow, and it also tells me the year. And after the actual dates, down at the end, it's annualized. You can see here from rows 22 onwards. I've just highlighted row 23 onwards there purely because that's what's going on afterwards, but it's actually highlighting the years. So it's annualized the cash flows in here. Great. And you can see, okay, I've got the numbers, and it's done exactly what I asked. I'm just thinking, well, yeah, okay, that's giving me that stuff, but can you actually recreate those forecast calculations? But what I want you to do this time, I'll tell you what, change my mind here, is let's get the discounted cash flow and see if you can calculate it in Excel and get the same number that you've been wittering on about here in the chatgpt.com interface. So let's recreate these DCF and let's have it in Excel with the formulas. And you can see I'm not even putting capital E's on Excel. I haven't even pluralized formula. It's just it knows what you're doing and realizes I can't type for toffee. Fine. So it's analyzing it. Let's see what it comes up with. So again, it's got another file to download. We'll go through the same rigmarole we did last time to download it. In it goes, same error message again. And look, actually here, before I hit enable editing, it looks like some of the formula are missing. And I've noticed this a couple of times that this has happened. And it freaked me out thinking, oh, it's not actually done it. But if you actually go up and think, okay, let's go and enable editing, it sort of all comes up. And I'm not quite sure why that is at the moment. But we've got these calculations in here. And you can see it's actually calculated the discount factor and it's annualized it here and put the discount factor to be 1 divided by 1 plus a discount rate to the power 1. So it's hard coded it. And then if I keep going down to the power 2, 3, 4, so not best practice, but I can see what's going on. I'd probably have an assumption somewhere else for the discount rate where it's assumed the 9%. And then the period number, well, I'd probably change column A to have the numbers 1 to 10 instead and reference that. But they're things you can fix up. If you'd no idea what you were doing beforehand, you've got some sort of idea, and then the discounted cash flow is multiplying the free cash flow by the DCF. That seems to make sense. Yep, and then what we're doing with the cumulative discounted cash flow in column E is it's adding them up. And it actually gives us in here actual calculations, including a terminal value you see there in cell D12. It's got an enterprise value of 1294491. Have I seen that number somewhere before? Is that right? Is that the number I wanted it to be? How about we go and check and see if that 1294491 is right for the assumptions we have used. So our free cash flow may be wrong, our discount rate may be wrong, we perhaps shouldn't be doing end of period discounting, but is it consistent with what it said before? So back into the ChatGPT interface, and lo and behold, in the base case, you can clearly see here the enterprise value 1294.49 billion. Well, at least it's coming up with the same thing. I remember watching videos about year and a half ago on LinkedIn, YouTube and others where people were actually making fun of doing calculations in different places and coming up with different numbers and then challenging ChatGPT or other AI saying, hey, these are different, and the AI would actually double down. So it is getting better, and that's my point. It's not perfect yet, but it is getting better. Okay, so we can save this if we want, we can close it or whatever, but it gives me some idea I have got these particular ones in here. Right, let's go back to the Excel file with the forecasts in and think about Copilot now. So let's compare and contrast and see what happens if we can actually do this in Excel. Now, I'm going to get rid of the quarterly numbers that are in here. I'll just use the annual numbers for years 1 to 10. So let's clean this up a little bit. I'm going to go through and remove the other stuff in a second. Before I do that, let's just open up the Copilot pane as well. And as a reminder, at the moment, Copilot isn't that good at pulling out all the data from a Microsoft website and scraping it through like Copilot and the generative PTs can actually get you here in terms of bringing the data in. So that's why we're taking that bit as read. So not quite there yet, even though Copilot is based on the ChatGPT engine. Now, also recall that in order to get Copilot to work, we've got to save it online. We've got to have autosave turned on and so on. So it's prompting us already before we go any further. We've got to turn it on, save it to OneDrive or something. So let's just put it through there. It's uploading a copy, yada, yada, yada. Right. Now, we will ask it a question in a minute. Let's clean up what I said I was going to clean up. So let's get rid of the data we don't need here. And we'll just have those annual figures and put them up. So I'm just tidying up and moving it up to the top. We'll leave column A as it is. It's a bit of a mess. But I want to see what Copilot can and can't cope with. So into the chat history on the Copilot pane. So Copilot, of course, is on button on the Home tab. It says, right, can you use this data to create a DCF, a discounted cash flow? So it's working on it and it's understanding our data. And it says, right, we've hit a problem. For the range A1 to E31, A1 to E31, I think I'm only in A1 to F11. What's going on there? So there are some revisions. It says modify the headers to be in a single row and add header names. It wants it in a table. So this is one of the frustrations. Now, some elements of Copilot no longer have that Control T insert table requirement, and some of them do. And in this case, we need that. So, all right, blah, blah, blah. Once it's in a table, let's go and add a table. So we'll highlight the range, Control T or insert table. We've got it in here, tidy it all up, and we can now have another go. Say, right, now use this table. Let's create a discounted cash flow. How about you do it right this time? So see what it comes up now. So it's analysing. Now it's looking at B1 to F11, so at least we got rid of 20 rows, so good thing here. And it says, oh, can't do this just yet. But here's a few steps to follow if you'd like to try. Oh, and I noticed this happen a few times. You see how the screen's sort of jiggling around when I'm trying to scroll down here. It's still working on suggestions, and I'm finding that if you're prone to seizures and things like this, you might want to wait till it finishes what it's doing. Right, so let's have a look. What's the problem here? It's not put it in, and it's suggesting steps, and it's saying some of the present values, put them through, and it's giving you the step-by-step formula to insert yourself. So do it yourself. So here we go. We've got the free cash flow of millions divided by 1 plus 10% to the power of the year minus 5. I don't know why the minus 5's there. We can probably figure it out, but running out of time. Some smart cookie watching this video say, oh, Liam, that's simply blah, or whatever. And then it's actually going through and it's saying, like, calculate terminal values, put that in, and so on. So it looks like it's on the right track. It's just a bit like me. It's too lazy to actually do it. So can you put these formulas in yourself? You see, rather than me copy and paste, let me type more words in. So it's generating formula column suggestions. Let's see where it gets to now. Well, it's come up with some ideas. It's got the formula. It's giving you a preview of what the present value of the free cash flow might look like. Dividing by 10% in this case, not 9%, so a different rate. Let's hit insert column. And it has put this formula in here, going through and thinking, okay, let's put that in. You can go and check whether or not that's right. As I say, conscious of the time here, don't want to go and tear the formula apart, but you can see what's going on. But it's only done the present value of the free cash flow. I wanted the enterprise value as well. So it's going through again. Now, just let's pause for a second for thought and think, do you remember when we were calculating the enterprise cash flow in ChatGPT? I said, do remember that's just done on the final period, and I think it was year 10 it did it on. Now, the reason I stress that at that point in time is, believe it or not, I haven't just not had a go at this and thought I'd just do this on the fly. I have had a look at seeing what's likely to happen here, although it's always a bit of a hiding to nothing with ChatGPT and Copilot that if you run the same thing twice, you'll get the same results. But I noticed there was a problem when it was trying to calculate the terminal value. And it's saying, well, it wants to sum the present value of the free cash flows and then add a perpetual growth rate of 3% to that. Well, that's wrong, isn't it? I mean, you want the final period and multiply by 1 plus the growth rate. So it's having a bit of an issue in here that it's not quite right. So sum the table and then do that and so on and so forth. So, okay, that's what it's thinking about doing. So if I went in here, I might say, okay, try one last time. Look, I've highlighted it. Calculate that terminal value. Let's put it in, see what you're doing. Right, it's come up with some suggestions again, what to do, and it's got hit in here what it's planning to do. It's going to sum the present value of the free cash flow, column G, and then it will calculate it that way. So we can go insert row. So it's summed it up. Okay, well that's net present value, isn't it? In there without the terminal value. It will give you the option to actually edit, and then after that, it would be say you would actually work out perhaps 3% of that for a terminal value, which is wrong. So in summary, it's struggling a bit when you're trying to do calculations that only affect one row of a table, and it still wants things in tables. It's not quite there yet. And the other thing, if we're doing free cash flows and calculations, is normally we want dates going across. and doing it that way. So we really want to transpose this table. And of course, there's no such thing in Excel at the moment as a Control T table where you've got the headings in one column and then all the values going across the columns rather than down a column, which is what's going on at the moment. So there is work to be done, but I don't quite know where it's going, and it's certainly a lot better than where it was. And if you had no idea about how to calculate a valuation, or you had no idea how to do a discounted cash flow, or work out terminal values, or what a discount rate, then it's a good start, but you'd need to still go and check it somewhere else. There is more to be done. There are limitations, but for the future, things may get better. And I think that's the thing to see that I remember a year and a half ago, it just couldn't get anywhere. The numbers were not consistent. We couldn't reconcile things. It's come a long way. What are the next 18 months going to do? I think it's very exciting times. And here at SumProduct, one of the things we're doing is we're really embracing it and seeing where it goes. Because even if it only gets 30, 40, maybe 50% right, that's 30 to 50% you don't have to do yourself. You may need to check it, but by checking it, you're going to get extra information, do more added value, compare and contrast with other companies, and do more analysis and less preparation. And isn't that what your job's about? I still think the future's exciting. I don't think your job's about to disappear. I don't think AI is about to take over the world. But I could be wrong, but I don't care. I'm long in the tooth now. They won't get me before I drop dead, probably. Famous last words, that's what I'm going to have on my epitaph. Well, I hope you found that all useful. Um, Sorry I have a rather inimitable style of presenting. Hopefully you could follow it. I wanted to say thank you for inviting me, Cristiano Galval, to Excel Weekend 10. I've enjoyed myself here. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. Maybe I'll get to Sao Paulo one day. But this was building forecast models with AI, Excel, trial and error, bit of luck, and so on and so forth. If you have any questions or comments or other things you'd like to say, well, drop me a line. I'm in Melbourne. The details of the Melbourne office of SumProduct are on screen now. We've actually got 5 offices around the world. We've got Sydney, where my colleague Tim Heng, also an Excel MVP, is actually located as well. So feel free to talk to him if you wish. We've got Steve Kranak, who used to be with Microsoft in the Excel team, now an MVP in the US, and just a brand new addition to the team, a 4th MVP and a data platform, Ilgar Zabaliev in Azerbaijan. So we've got a bit of a global presence, and we've also got an office in the UK. So if you've got questions, want to give some ideas, we are up for it. We are, as I say, writing a new book on AI with financial modeling. That's coming out hopefully later in the year if you're interested. But new ideas and things and other tricks and tips, we would be very interested in learning. And if you want to clarify anything, drop me a line. Otherwise, thanks very much for listening. If you enjoyed this session, my name is Liam Bastick. If you didn't, it's Cristiano Galval. Bye for now.